remember distinctly dragging my suitcase to the entire city and then falling on my posterior in a large puddle. So this is much nicer, I have to say. And it's really wonderful to be here too, because in a city that's as magnetic as we've heard as Hartford, I'm seeing that there's a whole lot of magnetism, not only interesting presentations of wonderful people, but also great ideas. And I think that's one of the most awesome things about conferences like this, is that your neighbors will be springboards for some of your best ideas, and you never know where you'll be able to take those. So I wanted to start with a question, actually, that I saw in a documentary I was watching about something called Independent Project. And it was asked by a student in Mount Whalen. He said, how can you teach someone about the world when you're isolating them from the world? How can you teach someone about the world when you're isolating them from the world? Those words really resonated with me. And the story of his education is one of the many stories of young people that I'll be telling today. Because I love racking up those metaphorical frequent flyer miles, we will be going on a whirlwind journey. It's a journey from classrooms in the Berkshires of Massachusetts to the garages of idealistic young programmers in Washington State, from street swarms of children in Ahmedabad, India, to high-powered meetings in Silicon Valley. Each and every one of these stories of people and places has a purpose. It paints a picture of a generation that demands a new educational experience, and the educators in their lives, both formal and informal, who have helped provide it to them. I think that educators at magnet schools probably know best that the strength of a society comes from the diversity of ways in which we measure merit and reward it. No economy of diverse individuals can flourish if we do not find merit in wider expressions of excellence beyond one-sided smartness in academics. There is so much value in the kinds of merit that don't get tested. In the arts, and sciences, and entrepreneurship, many of the same kinds of merit that you cultivate every single day in your schools. Today, I encourage you to think very broadly about what student achievement may mean, particularly in the 21st century. When a classroom of bright-eyed students, like the ones that you face, can be inventing new ways to diagnose cancer, or campaigning for progressive political candidates, or creating a curriculum to promote health education in developing countries, then they haven't reached their potential just by getting an A in your class. They haven't reached their potential just by getting a 5 on every AP or getting into all the colleges that they want to. By the end of this talk, I hope everyone walks away with one point: that regardless of our grades, our zip code, or our socioeconomic status, today's young people have unprecedented opportunities to have an impact on our global community. If we have a Starbucks and a Wi-Fi connection, we can do an incredible number of things. The role of incredible teachers, thus, is no longer just to disseminate information and spark passion for the topics that we learn about in school. It's to help us find real-world opportunities and change the world in the process. And I think that people will find this vision to be a little idealistic. And they often ask me why I think this generation is so different. Haven't young people always wanted to be listened to? Haven't we always complained about school? Haven't we always not wanted to wake up at 6 godforsaken 30 a.m. in the morning? Haven't we always rebelled in some way? Well, there are a lot of reasons this generation is different. And one of the first ones is our increasing economic and social power. Yes, some of this power comes from how much of our parents' money we spend. But I would also point out that a great deal of power comes from how much we create. Consider the innovations arising everywhere, from Silicon Valley to Colorado to London, where teenagers and 20-somethings are creating apps and companies that sell for millions, even billions of dollars. Consider a blogging site like Tumblr. Does anyone here use Tumblr? Do some raised hands? Wow, I'm seeing some folks use Tumblr. This is crazy. Who here knows what Tumblr is? Okay, a few more raised hands. So Tumblr is a blogging site, and it really promotes particularly sharing images, reblogging, things going viral, people creating content. A lot of teenage girls use it, also some teenage boys. There's a video app like Vine. Who here has used Vine before? Whoa, I'm actually seeing a lot. Okay, so some of you may know that Vine is where you make 6-second videos, and those oftentimes go viral. There's a whole Facebook page called Funniest Vines. I highly encourage you all to look it up at some point. And then there's a photo app like Snapchat, which allows you to take photos that self-destruct within 1 to 10 seconds. Now, these might seem like really silly little inventions. I mean, who wants to send a 10-second photo? But Twitter bought Vine, the app that lets you film 6-second videos, for $970 million. Yahoo bought Tumblr for $1.1 billion. And Facebook tried to buy Snapchat for $3 billion. Snapchat said no. Google tried to buy Snapchat Snapchat for 4 billion, and Snapchat said no, again. So the story behind Snapchat, to give you a quick overview, is that 2 Stanford University students named Evan Spiegel and Bobby Murphy floated this idea in their product design class. They wanted to create an app that would let you take photos that destroyed themselves in 10 seconds. Months later, they quietly launched the app from Bobby's dad's living room, and by May 2012, users were using it to send over 25 images per second. By November, over 1 billion photos were shared. This from a couple of kids who just had an idea in the product design class. This is what one op-ed piece I read calls the millennial American dream. In no other time in history could the decisions of some of the largest companies in the world be driven by a demographic that includes people like me who are too young to drink, to vote, or serve in the military. What we have instead of all of these exalted powers are our smartphones. And these little devices are how we drive the trajectory of some of the world's largest companies, media, and tech giants, maybe without even knowing that we are. But the question I ask, particularly right here, right now, is can we determine the trajectory of our schools? And more importantly, do our schools make us feel like we can determine the trajectory of our world? My peers and I want to be parts of projects and companies and cultures that we're excited about. We have grown up with so many attention-grabbing forms of media that we're impatient, but we're also visionary and ready to make our mark. This impatience, this vision, and this readiness are all assets if the adults in our lives are willing to make room, to listen, to believe. In my personal experience, that was exactly what adults did. When I was 6 years old and I started writing furiously, my mom didn't tell me to go back to practicing piano and violin. She actually miraculously let me quit and handed me a laptop so that I could type up stories faster than I could even think of them. And so by the time I was 7, I'd written over 300 short stories and I was still typing furiously away. When I told her then when I was 7, hey mom, I want to publish a book instead of telling me you're too young or that's impossible, she said, okay, try to figure out a way to do that. And when I was 8 and I started calling up principals at local elementary schools saying, I wanted to talk to your students in an assembly about reading and writing and how powerful stories can be, then some of those principals, instead of ignoring this diminutive child on the other line, said, okay, let's see. So I really credit the fact that adults looked at me and saw someone who was impatient and visionary and ready instead of just seeing a kid or, at this point, teenager. If you want to shift the disruptive mindset of the most interconnected generation in history into your school, then you have to work more like an organism and less like an organization. What I mean by that is that you have to be a living, breathing, changing, responsive place. You have to show this in everything you are and everything you do, so that those that join you are not there to work their way up through a firm structure, but immediately be part of a living system, where they feel like they can contribute and have an impact. A living system is essentially the most succinct definition of the independent project, which was the subject of that documentary I was watching. Matt Whalen, the kid who asked how to teach someone about the world when they're being isolated from it. And he was one of their founding members. It was basically built around the idea that students could be very powerful drivers of their own learning. And instead of focusing on spoon-feeding a set curriculum to the students, the independent project revolved around questions and projects. Half of the day was for a major independent endeavor the student proposed, such as writing a novel or learning an instrument, and half the day for inquiry-based learning in the natural and social sciences. They addressed questions ranging from, is there science behind old wives' tales, to how do mice react to aromatherapy? I'm still really looking for the answer to that question. They read more books in 8 weeks than their school's AP Lang class read in a school year, and what's more, they loved it. Before critics say, well, this was just some group of exceptionally motivated kids and that really isn't scalable, realize this. Students in this project came from across the academic spectrum. They were straight A students and they were special ed students. And they all piled into the spare room that was the head coach's office and the girls' locker room, and they started transforming it into a home base for learning. They painted the walls and brought in shelves and books. It may have been within the walls of a school, but in many ways it transcended this bubble that our schools often create for us. What I find most powerful ultimately about this project is that all the students took on a project of collective social significance, so the impact of this one learning project wasn't limited to these students who saw new ways of learning, but it actually spread out to the community. And this whole idea of a collective project with social significance is something that happened halfway across the world in Ahmedabad, India as well, where someone named Kiran Safi, principal of the Riverside School there, gave a TED Talk on education.
Contagious is a good word. Even in the times of H1N1, I like the word. Laughter is contagious. Passion is contagious. Inspiration is contagious. We've heard some remarkable stories from some remarkable speakers. But for me, what was contagious about all of them was that they were infected by something I call the I can bug. So the question is, why only them? In a country of 1 billion people and some, why so few? Is it luck? Is it chance? Can we all not systematically and consciously get infected? So in the next 8 minutes, I would like to share with you my story. I got infected when I was 17. When as a student of the design college, I encountered a Duz who actually believed in my ideas, challenged me, and had lots of cups of chai with me. And I was struck by just how wonderful it felt, and how contagious that feeling was. I also realized I should have got infected when I was 7. So when I started Riverside School 10 years ago, it became a lab to prototype and refine a design process that could consciously infect the mind with the I can bug. And I uncovered that if learning is embedded in real-world context, that is, if you blur the boundaries between school and life, then children go through a journey of aware, where they can see the change, enable, be changed, and then empower, lead the change. And that directly increased student well-being. Children became more competent and less helpless. But this is all common sense. So I'd like to show you a little glimpse of what common practice looks like at Riverside. A little background. When my grade 5 was learning about child rights, they were made to roll incense sticks, agarbattis, for 8 hours to experience what it means to be a child laborer. It transformed them. What you will see is their journey, and then their utter conviction that they could go out and change the world. So that's them rolling. And in 2 hours after their backs broke, they were changed. And once that happened, they were out in the city, convincing everybody that child labor just had to be abolished. And look at Raghav. That moment when his face changes because he's been able to understand that he has shifted that man's mindset. That can't happen in a classroom. So when Raghav experienced that, he went from teacher told me to I am doing it. And that's the I can mind shift. And it is a process that can be energized and nurturing. But we had parents who said, okay, making our children good human beings is all very well, but what about math and science and English? Show us the grades. And we did. The data was conclusive. When children are empowered, not only do they do good, they do well. In fact, very well. As you can see in this national benchmarking assessment taken by over 2,000 schools in India, Riverside children were outperforming the top 10 schools in India in math, English, and science.
So I'm going to stop there. Her entire talk is really good. It goes on to discuss how they went and made that I can contagious by starting a children's festival in Ahmedabad where they shut down some of the main roads and set up interactive exhibits, playgrounds, chalk hops, dodge, all these other things that kids are participating in, and it was really a day of joy for the entire city. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Kiran Safi's talk is that she was aware of some of the parents' concerns that, okay, you're making our kids go out and speak to people about child labor, that's great, you know, we appreciate they're doing good for the world, but are they also doing well? And she said, yeah, they really are. I understand that obviously having kids roll incense sticks for 2 hours might be slightly difficult to manage, if not mildly illegal in the US, but mildly illegal. I only started using that term when I entered high school. And I think that there is something we learned here, not just for Indian schools, but for schools around the world, which is that when you put students in a context where they're able to have an impact out in the world, where they're able to talk to people and change their minds, and see that what they're learning actually means something, then of course they're going to be more interested in what they're learning, they're going to put more work into it. Kiran Safi described contagious as a good word in her talk. And one of my friends, a kid named Ethan Perry, makes me agree. Ethan's curiosity is truly catching. I first met him when he was the height of Bilbo Baggins, and it was in the summer of 2011. He wanted to capture pictures of the curvature of the Earth from space. And he'd seen photos from space that cost $160 billion to photograph from the International Space Station. And like any audacious 13-year-old, he thought, I want to do that for under $300. He was all of 13 years old. So how does a 13-year-old take photos in near space? Well, first he packaged together a box of electronics with insulation to defend against negative 70-degree temperatures. He loaded his point-and-shoot camera with a hacked development kit that allowed him to trick the camera into thinking that a human was taking a photo every 10 seconds. And he designed a data logger that recorded temperature and air pressure and GPS location so that he could plot the entire journey on Google Earth. And finally, he attached a parachute and weather balloon, and after dragging his family out to his grandma's backyard in Texas, he launched it with 170 cubic feet of helium and waited nervously. Lens, as he called his project, the low-expense near space experiment, took 1,021 pictures and logged 30,000 data points as it rose to 27,027 meters. Ethan has all these stats memorized. At the highest altitude, the curvature of the Earth and the abyss of space are clearly visible. 4 hours later, Ethan's family drove down a dusty country road to recover Lens, where it was lying in a ditch, its camera still snapping pictures, which is why there are a few photos of them just like looking down at the camera. This is the world I know. It's a world in which 13-year-olds with point-and-shoot cameras from their parents can attach those cameras to weather balloons that go to space. Giving a kid like Ethan a meaningful education necessitates more than plopping a book in front of him and telling him to learn. Giving a kid like Ethan a meaningful education necessitates realizing the extent of his own ability and his desire to learn independently, and giving him a chance to be a partner and an author instead of just a recipient in his learning process. His pursuit of engineering, I fundamentally believe, should never be put on hold because of his education. It should be a central part of his education, which is why he goes to my district STEM school and has the opportunity to pursue internships at local companies and focus on real-world applications of science concepts. But there is so much more to be done, because for all the Ethans that are out there, the thousands of Ethans that are out there are so many whose parents can't drive them to Home Depot to get them weather balloons and 170 cubic feet of helium. Or there are some who never got handed a copy of Make magazine that triggered their interest in do-it-yourself projects. And I know that you can be that person who sends that kid or their camera soaring high enough to see the world from space. There are kids who send weather balloons into space, and then there are kids who start online petitions that garner thousands of signatures. I made a 2012 series of videos for Google called Teach Teachers Tech, and one of the projects that I discussed was using change.org petitions to get students motivated, to get them writing, to get them talking to their friends and family about important causes, and to get them interested in current events. A great example of a group doing exactly that was an elementary school class, and they watched the movie The Lorax. They felt like Universal Studios wasn't doing enough on their website to promote environmentalism, so they set up a petition. And before you say that elementary schoolers can't change the world or can't change anyone's mind, realize that that petition got enough signatures that Universal Studios actually addressed the issue and changed their website. A group of teenage girls got sent to magazine to promise to not egregiously Photoshop their models anymore. And another group of teenage girls pushed for the first female moderator in the US presidential debates in way too many years. So there's so much potential for students to have an impact within the context of their schools in a way that stretches beyond the scope of normal projects. When we bring the diorama in for our 4th grade history class, you know that it's pretty and it's gorgeous, and maybe our parents worked on it last night, but it sits there in the corner, and it doesn't go beyond that corner. I think that what students want is to go beyond that corner. We want to push through the walls of the classroom. When I went to the TED conference in 2010, that was very much a pushing beyond the corner experience. And I quickly found that I was the only 12-year-old in the room. I would literally walk into a party and people's heads would turn, and I would feel like, oh my God, I'm so little, in a way that I never had walking through the halls of school. Where some people might have found that to be special or cool that I was young and that people paid attention to me, I found it to be really depressing. Not just because I wanted friends to hang out with at TED, but also because ideas worth spreading have no age limit. and shouldn't be treated like they do. I wanted my friends back home to be able to access a marketplace of ideas as easily as I could. So I started a TEDx, or independently organized TED event, called TEDx Redmond, with a committee of all youth, speakers who were all youth, and an audience that numbered 700 in our first year quickly grew to 1,000. Organizing platforms like this is an excellent solution to the problem of students with a tremendous amount of potential and drive wandering around school, getting A's, doing well, but with their real dreams sitting in the back of their head or in the corner of that classroom with their real dreams deferred. In fact, Michael Shermer, who edits Skeptic magazine and is a professor at Chapman College, says that instead of a traditional final assessment with an essay or a multiple choice test, he has the students prepare a TED Talk. An 18-minute talk about some really important idea in their lives. They rehearse it, they present it, it's a really big deal. And he says the importance of their ideas has blown him away. Your future and the future of the world is as bright as our ability to harness this kind of insatiable, unstoppable brilliance. So why are we waiting? I have countless friends who are equally motivated, curious, and passionate about a variety of topics as I am. Yet they have never stood on a conference stage or answered questions on a TV interview or presented research in an international competition. And those of us who had those opportunities received them not because we were more gifted, not because we were more eloquent, not because we had special connections, but simply because we were lucky. And because we did so much outside of school. I had to present a little pink excused absence sheet to my teachers to sign, probably the 8th or 9th or 10th I've done this year. I've missed a lot of school, maybe about 40 days. My teacher said, Adora, can I ask you a candid question? I said, sure. She said, you've missed a lot of school through these opportunities. Has it been worth it? And I didn't hesitate to answer. Yes, I said. Yes, because the experiences I've had across 3 continents and more than a dozen countries have allowed me to meet some of the most incredible people on this planet, including a fair number of my own age. Because I realized something very important, that these incredible people at these conferences have not necessarily always been the most famous people, the speakers up on the stage, the Nobel Prize winners. They're the professors I make awkward eye contact with after reaching for the same macaroon and proceed to have an hour-long conversation about physics with. They're the young inventors who have come up with revolutionary devices to solve global problems. And more often than not, they are the supposedly ordinary students who I have interviewed on panels who have truly extraordinary stories, because we all do. That's why I'm hosting a student voice panel here today. That's why I told the stories of young people who succeeded because of what they did outside of school. And that's why I exhort all of you, instead of wondering, as generations of teachers have, simply how to bring the world to your classroom, why not bring your students to the world? There's a world outside that is so much bigger than the subjects we're learning, and my peers and I yearn for it. Because the role of incredible teachers, as I stated earlier, is more than disseminating information and sparking passion. It's making us explorers who seek opportunities and define what merit means on our own terms. There's a world out there of startups and science fairs and slam poetry competitions. And it's a world that we often feel separated from within our schools. But that's by accident and not design, so we can change it with purposeful intent. We can, and I hope we will. I want to welcome on stage students who will tell you stories of teachers who have helped them do exactly that. Could we please have up on stage, hopefully we have some handheld mics for these folks as well. We have Kelsey, or Kelly,